Good morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday. Have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed, we do. Lots of recriminations on the Democratic side after the shutdown cave, and Angus King says standing up to Trump didn't work. So we'll break all of that down for you. Trump is out floating $2,000 checks. Ghislaine Maxwell is asking for a commutation of her sentence and getting lots of special perks so she gets to play with the puppy while she is in prison. Who wouldn't love that? Incredible things happening there. Also, incredible things happening in the White House yesterday, where the former al-Qaeda leader turned president of Syria made a historic visit and got sanctions relief and all sorts of things. Wild world that we're living in here. We have new indications of an AI bubble that we are tracking. We're also taking a look at the fight over on the Republican side over Miriam Adelson's loyalty and what countries she's citizen of and all that sort of stuff. And the co-founders of APAC Tracker are going public exclusively with us. Previously, they've been anonymous. Obviously, their information gathering has been incredibly influential in terms of raising awareness about AIPAC's influence in our country's politics. So really excited to share with you guys that interview that we recorded with them yesterday.
Yep, that's right. Excited for that. Thank you to everybody who has been subscribing to the show, breakingpoints.com, if you're able to help us out. That's how we get stuff like the AIPAC interview. We are a place to see and be seen, right, for the AIPAC Tracker, which, of course, has been very influential. So thank you very much, breakingpoints.com, to become a member. If you can't afford it, no worries. Please just go ahead and hit subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you're listening to this as a podcast, please send your favorite episode to a friend or rate us 5 stars. It really helps the show grow. But with that, let's go ahead and get to the shutdown.
Let's get to the Dems and what's going on with them. So Chuck Schumer, obviously, and I think appropriately, taking a lot of heat for being leader while manufacturing this shutdown. Now, he put out, I'm sure this leak came from his camp yesterday, about how he was really opposed to the cave and that he was behind the scenes working to push these senators who ultimately caved to hold out for longer. Of course, if that is true, which I'm very doubtful of, that just means that you're extraordinarily weak. However, Jeanne Shaheen, who was the lead negotiator of the deal to end the shutdown, she said, no, we were in touch with leadership throughout, basically backing up some of the reporting that was coming out of the American Prospect and other places. Let's go ahead and take a listen to what she said.
Senator Chuck Schumer, your leader on the Senate, said, I cannot support a continuing resolution that fails to address health care. I am voting no. Did you do this outside leadership? And was there a big push for you not to join the others and break the 60 threshold?
No, we kept leadership informed throughout.
Kept leadership informed throughout? Was there a big push to get you to not go along? No, we were, talking to leadership. And of course, I mean, we talked to Rokada about this yesterday. He said basically, like, do you think we're stupid? Of course, Chuck Schumer was involved in this. And you can see it even in the strategy of which senators went along with the shutdown deal. None of them are up for re-election. They know this is politically toxic for their own base. So it's all people who are either retiring or not up until at least 2028. And so, your two options here are either Chuck Schumer was sort of like tacitly good with this or affirmatively pushing it, or so weak that he couldn't hold his caucus together. Either scenario, not a great look for him.
One of the things the inside reporting has come out is that Chuck Schumer this whole so-called gang of Democrats, like moderates, in his office sometime in October, about a month, or maybe like 3 or so weeks ago. And he was like, look, just at least hold out until November 1st. And this actually fits with a lot of the stuff that we reported throughout. They're going to wait until November 1st for open enrollment. They were going to get their news cycles about premiums go up. And he was like, okay, if you guys cave after that, so be it. And allegedly he said that he wouldn't stop the deal. But of course, like if he wanted to, he absolutely could have. I think the complicating factor in this is that what changed was the 2025 election day. And it was very clear, how much energy a lot of the Democrats had. It was a blowout. I mean, we covered that one statistic, that 18 out of 18, whether it would have been a good night for Democrats. And that actually genuinely would have shifted the calculus if you are Chuck Schumer. I do think, and more that I've sat with it, I think that the Thanksgiving travel ended up being the deciding factor, because Snap was already on the ropes, but I don't think they actually cared. I think a lot of them, and this is one of the things that Trump did, is apparently the administration specifically target our airport here, Reagan National. They're making travel hell for a lot of the congressmen and the senators who are flying in and out of DC. And I mean, if you think about who are the people who fly a lot, it's like upper middle class, mostly liberals, especially at this time, people who are higher income. So, I mean, all signs, and this is not just me, but including some reporting out there, the Thanksgiving travel thing seemed to be one of the major pushes for a lot of these, so-called moderate Democrats, which is kind of interesting, actually, in terms of why they decided to fold.
It's not just their own inconvenience and, the people who are like their primary supporters and all of that. It's also the airline industry gives
Well, I talked about that. Bailouts, if they went through that, they would have had to get bailed out. It would have been really bad.
And
You're
so
exactly right.
I'm sure airline lobbyists were blowing up their phones and others as well. And then, but I actually think another key part was the threat from Trump to nuke the filibuster. Now, to me, that would have been a superior end where you're like, you stay strong, you go to the mat, and you force the Republicans to nuke the filibuster, something they don't really want to do because they, like these lame Democrats, like having the excuse of the filibuster because that gives them a reason, a good excuse for why they can't actually deliver. These are the filibuster is the best friend of the lame corporate Democrat who really wants to serve their donors but wants to posture like they care about serving the American people. And so they can always throw up their hand, oh, the filibuster, it's so hard, we'll never get 60 votes, we can never do anything, etc. So I actually think that the potential threat of getting rid of the filibuster was another piece that really pushed them across, the finish line or whatever, the cave line, the pathetic line, the loser line. These are also people who wanted to cave from the beginning. So they were looking for any possible excuse, any possible off-ramp that they could potentially take. Just to underscore what a group of pathetic losers this is. Angus King, who's technically an independent of Maine, went on Morning Joe to justify his vote. And by the way, guys, I was watching some MSNBC yesterday. They are across the board irate. It really is the level of backlash from the Democratic base is quite astounding, including the Joe Scarboroughs of the world, including the Rachel Maddows of the world, who is seldom critical of the Democratic Party. But in any case, Angus King said this extraordinary thing to Joe Scarborough, which is that, quote, standing up to Trump didn't work. Let's take a listen.
Well, Joe, you have to go back to what the strategy was at the beginning of the shutdown. There were two goals, both of which I support. One was standing up to Donald Trump. The other was getting some resolution on the ACA premium tax credit issue. The problem was the shutdown wasn't accomplishing either goals, and there was there was zero likelihood that it was going to. In terms of standing up to Donald Trump, the shutdown actually gave him more power, Exhibit A being what he's done with SNAP and SNAP benefits across the country. Oh, by the way, Joe, you're going to love this. Guess who's getting paid during the shutdown? Not the park rangers or air traffic controllers, the ICE agents. Under special law, under that big, awful bill that they passed last summer, the ICE agents are being paid. Nobody else is. So standing up to Donald Trump didn't work. It actually gave him more power.
Standing up to Donald Trump didn't work. Literally resign. Seriously, if you want to be in the opposition party and actually fight, which is what your own voters are demanding you do, and your view is that standing up to Trump doesn't work, genuinely you should step aside and let someone else in who has a different idea, a different conception of power, because this is utterly pathetic. And it's not even true, Saagar. Trump was freaking out after this election, screaming at people that the government needed to be reopened. The pressure was all on the Republicans. They were owning this shutdown, all the chaos at the airports and whatever. That was falling squarely at their feet. So, in fact, it was working. And I think Ezra Klein made a great point in his piece, which was also decrying this pathetic deal that they struck, saying, listen, the thing Trump is going to take from this is that they will always cave. All you have to do is threaten them, bully them, hold out a little bit, and you're going to get your way. We always suspected that would be the case with the Democrats. They had a chance to push it, to prove everyone wrong this time. But instead, once again, they demonstrated their habitual weakness, and that even when they hold all the cards, even when there's just been this national reckoning that sent as clear a message as possible that, people are rejecting the Trump administration and they are behind you in this strategy, that's the moment you choose to cave is beyond pathetic.
It's absolutely pathetic, especially, the election demonstrated that Republicans are under-enthused and Democrats are turning out to vote. What else do you possibly need? You're people are behind you to actually, in terms of your strategy. Now, in terms of how it all plays out, what we saw with, first of all, with Angus King, he's not even sharp up there. He can barely get a sentence out. Brother,
over his
get out of here. This is why, people get mad at me about targeting old people. Sorry, all right? You can't be having these people up there at the top for decades. This is what happens. I'm not going to continue to go down that road, but the point that demonstrates is how weak they are. And I made this point yesterday where I actually think a lot of people should be really mad. I mean, they immiserated tens of millions of people.
Completely agree.
Millions of people. Do you know how many people?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They got nothing.
I mean, I told you that story. I was at the grocery store and this lady is like, going through her wallet. She's talking about being furloughed because they asked, hey, can you donate to the food bank? She's like, I need a donation because I'm furloughed. I can barely afford these groceries. The food banks around here are going crazy. I know so many people who are furloughed. You screwed them for nothing. You got the same deal. You melted down air travel. Millions of people had to do, I don't cry for the consultant business class, but it's not nothing. Sometimes people have to fly home for funerals or for weddings.
Yeah.
I've seen brides get stuck during cancellations. It's horrible. All right. So you can't be doing this to people when you took the same deal, which was on the table 3 weeks ago. And by the way, my insurance is still high and so is yours, right? So it's like nothing changed
Literally
here.
got nothing.
Yeah.
No, I was at the Y with my son, and there was a lady at the counter who was like, I have to cancel my membership. Can I get last month back? I'm furloughed. It's like, you screwed with people's lives, and for what? Mm-hmm. For the same thing you could have gotten on day one. I mean, it really is. It's enraging. Yeah. And I know we're not the only ones who feel that way. I mean, I genuinely think there was already a lot of Dem Tea Party energy. A lot of takes out there that are like, that's it, Graham Plattner will be the next senator for Maine. Those types of candidates who demonstrate that they are actually committed to a fight and are willing to say Chuck Schumer is out. There is no way in hell I'm voting for Chuck Schumer as leader again. Those are the type of candidates who are going to succeed. If Chuck Schumer is behind you, he is behind Janet Mills, he is behind Haley Stevens, there are other candidates, other sort of centrist-y candidates that he is backing, whether publicly or more surreptitiously, that is a mark of shame for those candidates. And it is people are going to look at that negatively in a Democratic primary and vote for their opponents simply because they are disgusted. They feel betrayed. They're horrified by this continued demonstrated weakness coming from the Democrats. And lo and behold, the one thing they supposedly got, which again had been on the table from the beginning, is a vote sometime in December on the ACA subsidies. Well, it's a vote in the Senate. There's no guarantees that the House is even going to take it up. And Mike Johnson yesterday confirmed what all of us, with 3 brain cells could see, which is that they're not going to take it up. He says, no, I'm not going to commit to a vote in the House on this stuff. Let's take a listen to that.
We'd like to bring back to the table because that will actually solve the problem and not just subsidize insurance companies.
So you're not committing to bringing up a bill that deals with the Obamacare subsidies before they expire?
I'm not committing to it or not committing to it. What I'm saying is that we do a deliberative process. That's the way this always works, and we have to have time to do that, and we will in a bipartisan fashion.
Sounds like something Trump would say. I'm not committing to it. I'm
not committing to it.
I mean, they're not going to vote on it because he doesn't want to put his people on the record if he doesn't have to, because it'd be unpopular to vote against this. But they also don't actually want to pass the subsidies. So this is all thoroughly, completely predictable. And, speaking of the backlash and how widespread, I mentioned Ezra Klein, Jonathan Chait, Neera Tanden, really ideologically broad spectrum of liberals and lefties who are furious at the Democratic Party right now. There are a few exceptions, but they are pretty lonely voices at this point. Yesterday, the ladies of The View were taking the Democratic Party to task as well. Let's go ahead and take a listen to a little of that.
I want an opposition party. I think the Democrats caved. I think the Democrats let down the American people. And like you, Whoopi, I have absolutely no faith that the Republican Party will come to the negotiating table in good faith. You do something like this, shame on you the first time. You do it twice, 3 times, 4 times, shame on me. Shame on the Democrats for even believing that the Republicans will, even vote on it. There's no guarantee in this New Deal that there's going to be a vote. There's no even commitment to have a vote. So the bottom line is the Democrats went into this after a blue wave out of the American people saying, we do want the opposition. We the working people want the Democratic Party to fight for them. And now they just caved and surrendered. I think Chuck Schumer, his days are over. If he cannot keep his caucus together, he needs to go.
A number of Democrats in the House, at least, have come out and called for Chuck Schumer to go. Rashida Tlaib being one of those voices. Obviously, we talked to Ro Khanna yesterday, who was the first of those voices. So kudos to him for showing some leadership there. I could put A5 up on the screen. I think there's roughly 8 Democratic members of the House who have come out and said that Schumer needs to go. Unfortunately, not a single senator, including Bernie Sanders, was asked about it yesterday. He expressed, his differences of opinion with Chuck Schumer, but refused to call for him to step aside from leadership. So very disappointing that there's no senators, Democratic senators, who are willing to listen to their own voters about the direction that the party should go in, and allowing it to continue to be led by a guy who can't even say whether or not he voted for the Democratic nominee in New York City is pretty pathetic. At the same time, let's put A6 up on the screen. Apparently, internally, tons of recrimination that's complete BS. Dems go ballistic over Senate shutdown deal. You had Move On come out as well and say Schumer should resign. This is about these internal, Dem party text message chains where people were just losing it over this, this deal. We can put next one up on the screen, A7. It's being called a complete betrayal. This is about the 2026 Democrats who were all uniformly slamming the shutdown deal. And as we mentioned before, the most vulnerable senators, people like Jon Ossoff, who are up this year, they voted against the deal because the politics of voting for this thing are trash. And so even, they had Roy Cooper was the candidate that you see there, who's moderate governor of North Carolina. He's certainly no lefty. Even he was critical of this deal. In Maine, you had both Graham Plattner and Janet Mills who were critical of it. All 3 of the Senate candidates in the Michigan Democratic primary were critical of it. And some went even further. Let's go ahead and listen to Graham Plattner put out a video, again, calling for Schumer to resign. Let's listen to that.
This happened because Chuck Schumer failed in his job yet again, because they do not understand that when we fight, we win. When we hold the line for working families, for working people, we win. But they don't get this. They see all of this as a game. These are just numbers on a sheet of paper, not people's lives. We need to elect leaders that want to fight. We need to elect leaders that care about people, that care about the actual outcomes of policies. Call your congresspeople, call your senators and tell them that Chuck Schumer can no longer be leader. Call your congressmen and tell them that they cannot vote for this when it comes to them on Wednesday. We need to fight back. But sadly, until we elect more Democrats that understand that fighting is what we need to do, we're going to find ourselves in this position over and over and over.
Look, I think this is going to be a litmus test for a bunch of Senate candidates this year. And, this will be fuel on the fire of that anti-establishment Democratic Party base backlash, long overdue, by the way, in my opinion. But, the level of disgust they already had with Democratic leadership is going to be just multiplied by tenfold by this betrayal. And they haven't forgotten the fact that in the first opportunity to use their leverage and force a shutdown, that they just didn't even bother. They haven't forgotten about the fact that, they've just seemed to be weak-kneed and pathetic all the way along. And then you get one thing, finally, okay, they're going to fight a little bit, and then instantly, cave at a time when the Democratic Party is riding high, when they should be feeling a lot of momentum and sense of, okay, we're doing something, we're fighting, people see that, we're going to move into the midterms, we're well positioned. Instead, you've just sucked all the wind out of the sails of the party after what was, monumental victories last week.
You definitely have. I do wonder, though, if it actually helps a lot of these candidates because they can run against the party establishment. That was part of what made the Tea Party actually successful, is they weren't running as Republicans. They were running against the Republican and the Democratic establishment, which is what people were mad about. So I actually would be happy if I were Graham Plattner, because he's already said he doesn't support Schumer. So it's like,
it definitely
emboldens his point,
definitely
right?
benefits them politically.
So I actually think the insurgent candidates, this is a good thing. I do think one of the things, though, that this did demonstrate is how ill-conceived I think the shutdown was from the Democratic side in the first place. Because as you and I discussed, it wasn't really about healthcare, right? That's not what most people were up in arms about. At the end of the day, only 7% of people are even affected by Obamacare premiums. It's just not that many people. In the grand scheme of things, that's not the ultimate problem with health insurance. Health health insurance's number one problem is cost. People were mad about Trump for a whole host of reasons. I think, healthcare premium was like number 50. They decided to kind of make that a linchpin. And to their credit, we're sitting here talking about it, so it definitely kind of worked.
Yeah,
but,
it definitely reframed the conversation.
It reframed the conversation about healthcare, but, if you read the centrist arguments, they're like, can anyone point to me how the shutdown would have worked out better? And I was like, the one thing they have going for them is that because they put their whole strategy just on healthcare, they didn't really have like a fulsome nature of ask. And this is on Schumer and on leadership too. And this kind of gets to where the Plattners and others, like when they come into office, you also have to professionalize what it is you're asking for, right? So, I mean, by the way, I also think that many of the asks and the so-called whims were lame as hell. Like they were like, oh, no more RIFs, like government employees. Like, I'm sorry, like nobody gives a shit about government employees getting fired. Like no one, yes, healthcare, like I just said, it's only 7% of people who are on the Obamacare exchanges. Most of them are elderly or small business owners like you're myself. Not exactly the most, tender demographic politically. They needed something real, like, and maybe something not even necessarily attainable, but stuff that actually got to the heart of what people are very upset about with Trump. But I mean, this is part of the failure you and I have talked about, like with Venezuela, right? Like if I were designing something, I'd be like, no invasion of Venezuela, right? That's in part of the deal. If I were a Democrat, what are people most upset about? ICE and stuff like that. I'll put some riders in there and be like, we're not signing shit until there is some actual agreement here on behavior of ICE or Border Patrol, like the stuff that people are really mad about. This is where I think the Republicans did a better job in some of their shutdowns, where they got to the heart of what people were pissed about. Like it became a line. 2013, the big shutdown, it was over DACA. Like that was it. Immigration was the number one issue. Remember Boehner suing Obama in court about, like, that was what the entire thing was about. And it gave people a real reason to fight. It's also why the cave wasn't really as much as a cave as this one. So this is really, I think, an indictment of the Democratic establishment for trying to pick a poll-tested thing to fight on and not coming to terms with, like, what are we mad about at the Trump administration? And this gets to, establishment failure too, and even the heart really of it. Like at the end of the day, these people are fighting to subsidize insurance companies. Like this is why I can't get past with ACA premiums. Like, look, my in-laws insurance went $1,800 to $4,200. That's horrible. It's devastating. But $1,800 was also a shitload of money, and the money is coming from us paying health insurance companies who are continuing to jack up prices. That's, I don't know. I can't really get past that, I guess. Like they needed something concrete. What's the base mad about? Put those 5 things down on a list. We all come together. We at least kind of agree on some of them. We got to get 3 out of 5 before we do anything.
I think the base just wanted to see them fight.
Yeah.
I don't think they cared that much about the details. I just think they wanted to see Trump get punched in the nose, which he was last week in the elections for sure. And then it's after that, that's the moment when, in spite of the fact you got literally nothing in terms of a concession, that's the moment that you're going to decide to cave. I mean, I think that's the part people just cannot get past. And so, I have been saying this from the beginning too, of like, what's really animating the Democratic base is a lot of Trump's just like, insane authoritarian overreach, the masked agents in the streets, the National Guard deployments, those sorts of things. That really gets the core of what the base is concerned about. Leadership has been very squeamish about pushing back on any of that. They've always, from the beginning, this is a distraction, the Epstein files is a distraction. Talking about Kilmer Abrego Garcia is a distraction. Talking about National Guard in the streets is a distraction. We need to just talk about egg prices and that's it and nothing else. And, I think that strategy has proven incorrect. And I think that the American people have been pretty horrified by a lot of the abuses that they have seen. And these things, they go together. You don't have to only talk about the economy or only talk about the abuses. You can talk about the way that Trump has basically seized the power of a king. That's why the No Kings protests were so appealing to people and made a lot of sense to people, that he's favoring the oligarchs over, ordinary people. He's sending these thugs in to abuse ordinary American citizens. Meanwhile, he's denying you food stamp benefits and giving out taxes cuts to the rich, et cetera. There is a coherent message there, but Democratic leadership is very afraid of talking about anything that has to do with, like, that touches on crime whatsoever, that touches on immigration whatsoever. And so they've been very squeamish about that. So instead, they picked this issue of the healthcare subsidies that they felt like would be a good wedge. And in a sense, it was. You know, Republicans realize it's going to be a problem for them when everybody's healthcare premiums skyrocket and they're stuck holding the bag. That is still the case. And the you know, people I've seen online that are like Tim Millers of the world from the Bulwark who are making the case that actually Democrats won this fight, et cetera. That's what they're pointing to, is basically like, look, they raised the salience of the issue of healthcare. It's a very good issue for Democrats. They did fantastic in the elections, in part because of the shutdown strategy. Republicans are going to be on the record and have to own completely now, and everyone will know that they own the fact that healthcare premiums are skyrocketing. And there is something to that. Like, I don't think that it's that, like, Democrats politically did achieve some things out of this strategy. But Matt Stiller was making this point that, you know, I think is similar to what you're saying of effectively, you know, the real issue with the shutdown strategy is that the Democratic Party apparatus doesn't really know what it wants. They were never really on the same page about like, okay, what does victory look like in this? What is the resolution that we're actually aiming for here? How are we going to effectuate that outcome? And since they were sort of muddled and confused and on different pages, you know, different people had different goals in the shutdown, that's how it becomes easy to peel off these, you know, 8 lame corporatist Democrats to get them ultimately to cave. So, you know, I think the party is really it's in a transitional place right now. Right. There is a true battle going on between the Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries way of doing business that has been, you know, rock solid in the Democratic Party for years and years, and these new insurgents. And the new insurgents definitely have the energy of the base of the party. You know, Zohran Mamdani being emblematic of that, Graham being emblematic of that up in Maine. You've got a very close 3-way race now in Michigan right now between Abdul El-Sayed and Mallory McMorrow, who's kind of like, you know, progressive-ish, but a little bit more mainstream. And then Haley Stevens, who's the pick of Chuck Schumer, who's just like, you know, totally normal establishment type of Dem. So you have a battle going on right now within the Democratic Party, and I don't think that they're going to be able to really solidify any sort of clear agenda until you get to like 2028 and you have this out in a Democratic primary and you have a new leader and someone who has some sort of Democratic legitimacy. One last point. Let me put this up on the screen. We looked at some of these word clouds yesterday. This is A8, just to underscore how the strategy really was putting pressure on the Republicans and very politically damaging for them right before the cave. So, you know, if you go back to October 9th through 13th, you ask people, okay, what negative things have you heard recently about Trump? It's all about shutdown and government and tariffs. The next week, they ask again, it's still shutdown, government, tariffs. The following week, it's ballroom, White House, East Wing, destroying. And then November 1st through 3rd, you know, leading into the elections, it's shut down food stamps, SNAP, government. So, you know, the Democratic messaging for the first time really, I think was breaking through. You know, these were the messages that
I don't
they
think that's
wanted
a messaging
to.
thing.
You don't
I think
so?
that's just reality.
Reality thing.
There's 42 million people who are on food stamps.
Yeah.
That's just a shitload of people. Like, you know, think about it. That's more people than work for the federal government. We sat here and talked about people who were furloughed. That's only 2 million people. This is 42 million, literally 21 times the number. What is that, 1/7 of the entire United States? Like, that's crazy.
I was looking at some polling of from YouGov, and one of the questions was just like, are you on food stamps or someone in your family?
Right.
And for people under 50K, it was 50%.
Yeah, so there you go.
People who either, you know, themselves were on food stamps or someone in their family. So they're taking like a direct hit. They're seeing personally what an impact it is. So, but in any case, you know, that's where things stood when they decided, like, let's just take a deal that gives us literally nothing.
Yeah, you know, just thinking about it again broadly, I don't know. I think one thing that is the problem in this fight with the split over who the party is you can overread too, you know, like one of the things, like the centrists are totally convinced that they have won because of the Spanberger and Sherrill victories.
Yeah.
The Mamdani people, like yourself, are also totally convinced that they've won. And I don't think really either are correct. I mean, you know, yes, you won some and then others won others. And neither vision has dominated at a national level for like who the party is, right? And both are like pretending that the other side doesn't. Well, actually, the centrists are more pretending the left part doesn't exist. Buttigieg not congratulating Mamdani, insane, like literally insane. I'm like, dude, like what? He's a Democrat. Like, why can't you just be like, congratulations? I actually don't understand it or even remotely where it comes from. kind of more of a secondary point. What you risk in the interim couple of years, though, is you don't really have a national brand of resistance or a vision for alternative, and that's how you lose. Even when you let's say have the shutdown fold, in some ways, like a lot of Republicans can point to that and be like, look, Trump was an effective leader against the Democrats whenever they were all up. I mean, by the way, even in the elections, yes, I think the Democrats did very well. We're still talking about an off-year 2025 election. The idea of some national referendum is ridiculous. Like the vast majority of people didn't even vote. And in midterms is going to be much more voters, still a much lower turnout election than what eventually comes in 2028. I've been thinking, I really think a lot of this is a victim of no primary after Biden. It really is shocking to think how the Democrats have not been able to hash out their differences since 2020. And even that was kind of a rigged primary with COVID and with Obama coming in. So the last time there was like a real fight, it was 2016. So just watching how this all plays out, the cognitive dissonance between the two sides, I think that's the biggest consequence. And it does show you the ratifying and healing nature of democracy. Like, one reason why Trump is lockstep is because he won. Like, he won multiple times. 2016, he won the primary in 2024, and he got the popular vote. Like, no Republican can credibly stand up and be like, actually, my side is correct, right? You have to defer to the leader. This rudderlessness, I think, is really a real problem for them. And it also shows, I think, some of their risks going forward, because they don't have the answers to the irreconcilable questions inside of their coalition. And both sides can be like, well, no, see, our guy won in New York, and people in Virginia are like, well, we won in Virginia, we're not the same. Like, this stuff needs to get hashed out at the national level.
Yeah, for sure. But I would say, like, I still think even if with the Democrats being like lame and weak and sucking, well, they were lame and weak and sucking going into these off-year elections, and they romped. I mean, it was maybe not a nationwide referendum just because of it being an off-year election, but literally every race went Democrats, with literally ever, regardless of the state. Supreme Court races in Pennsylvania, Proposition 50 in California, Virginia, New Jersey, Georgia, Mississippi, like across the friggin' board. And so I think that probably the cake is baked for a backlash election in 2026, even with the Democrats being like lame and not offering any kind of a vision. But you're absolutely right. I mean, this is what is being hashed out right now and is going to be hashed out in these primaries to come. I think you're already seeing it. And so to me, probably the biggest political legacy of this shutdown fight is just further enraging the Democratic base and radicalizing them against their own leadership. There's already been a lot of that. This, I think, is just fuel on the fire. And, to your point, like the Graham Plattners of the world, the Abdul Sayeds of the world, like the more renegade outsider candidates, this is going to inure to their benefit. So, for the corporatist Democrats who caved, thinking that this, benefits their political worldview, I think they have only further alienated their own voters from the brand of politics that they espouse. Yeah,
I absolutely think that's correct. And I don't disagree on 2026. That's not real. I was more really talking about 2028, because there's no credible, like, we won at a national level. That's what really, that's Trump shut everybody up in 2024, not with the primary, but with the election. We're like, it's over, okay? It's MAGA, it's period, it's done, right? We won the popular vote. There's no more ifs, ands, or buts. Obama did the same with Hillary. He crushed her in the primary. It was just done. Like, you can't really argue about it anymore. Hillary, I mean, in some ways kind of did it to Bernie in 2016. At the end of the day, she did win. I don't think she did a very good job, and she didn't bring those people in, so a lot of them didn't come out to vote. But this just really shows me the power of actual democratic politics, and that's a bigger indictment of the establishment. Not just about the shutdown, but like going back in the fact they've never really been battle tested, over these last 8 years. I think it's a real issue. Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.